So last class, we'd have ended here, and we're gonna just take a look at what each of these different financial institutions are. Right, and one person is joining. So the commercial bank is the type of bank that we would be or should be most familiar with. They provide individuals like us and firms with different banking services. We allow us to deposit money, make payments, um, take loans, do safekeeping services like safety deposit boxes and stuff like that. You transfer money online. A few other services, right? Then we should all should be kind of aware of financial, commercial banks. And we have the stock exchange. This is where we buy shares. Any kind of stocks, bonds, shares, all these things are bought on the stock exchange. So if you want to become part owner of a business, for example, and you want to buy shares in the business, you have to go log on to the stock exchange, see if it's being sold, how much it's being sold for, and purchase it there. You have credit unions. These provide similar services to commercial banks, but they are set up quite differently. Banks are created to make a profit. Credit unions are owned and controlled by the members and are created to benefit the members. So once you join a credit union, technically, not technically only, actually, you are part owner of that credit union. Because to join the credit union, you must purchase shares in the credit union. You get loans, savings accounts, stuff like that. Just like with banks, they normally have lower interest, but in most cases, they do it on a smaller scale. Then we have development banks. They look at large loans for a particular sector of the economy. So you might have an agricultural development bank. And you get a agricultural loan, a loan to invest into agriculture, for example. And then we have insurance companies. I think we should know what insurance companies are. They provide financial protection against the risk of things that might happen. So if you get sick, they can't really prevent you from getting sick. But part of the risk of getting sick is the money that you have to spend to get better. The insurance company would take that financial risk. So in the event that you get sick, instead of you having to spend your money, the insurance company will spend their money instead. That is how it works. We have mutual funds. Somebody asking something?
No, I just agree.
Oh, okay, okay. Goody, goody. Right, so we have mutual funds. So this is like large investments that you may not be able to afford by yourself normally. So what they do, they combine investments from different people and make one large investment. And then they share the benefit. Building societies, they provide um similar financial services like banks, but they specialize in mortgages, lending money to buy property. Then we have, ooh, ooh, sorry about that. Then we have investment trust companies. These companies, they would accept deposits from the public, so it's mostly a public limited company. They also sell their shares on the stock exchange. Push. And then we have the informal sector. So the informal sector, they don't, they are not really detected. I'm not just saying they're not detected by the government, but they don't do things that would make them show up in any official capacity. So if I make a deposit in the bank, there's an official record of me making a deposit in the bank. But if I am part of a SUSU, there is no official record that I am part of a SUSU. So it's not regulated like the other financial institutions. Or if I am a money lender, so I have a little extra change and I lend people money and tell them, well, you had to pay me back by so and so date and you had to give me so and so amount of interest. But I have no formal registration or anything like that. I would not be regulated by the government. The government may not even know I exist. So that would be part of the informal sector. So once they offering some sort of financial service, but they're not being formally regulated, they are part of the informal crediting informal sector. Now let's look at the difference between financial instruments. There's two types of financial instruments you could get. One is equity and one is debt. So debt securities, you're basically lending money where they must pay you back with interest. So that is a way for you to earn income, right? To lend the money, regardless of they making a profit or loss, they have to pay you back the money in installments and they have to pay interest. So bonds, debentures, notes, things like that, treasury notes, etc. Those are considered debt securities. Equity securities provide ownership. Once you take part in an equity security, you now own something and you will get paid in dividends. So every year you'll get paid a value of the shares that you bought. So ordinary shares, preference shares, once you buy shares in a company, that is considered an equity security. So again, debt security is you lending money that must be paid back to you with interest. Equity security is you purchasing ownership or part ownership in a company. And he hopes that it will increase in value and earn you some income. Debt securities, you must get paid back with interest over a period of time. Equity securities is really based on how successful the investment was. So debt securities is lending, equity securities investing. So treasury bonds, corporate bonds, municipal bonds, those are all debt securities. When you take a treasury bond, you're basically lending money to the government and you have to pay it back with interest. If you do a corporate bond, you're basically lending money to a company and you have to pay it back with interest. When you're doing a municipal bond, you're basically lending money to a governmental unit and they have to pay it back with interest. Now, when you buy shares in a company, that would be an equity security because you now have ownership or part ownership of that company. Now, let's look at this question. It says table 1 shows the value of financial assets in a country. For sure. Right. We have financial assets and the values for each. And then they say using the table, the information on the table, they want you to highlight the total value of it was M0. Oh gosh. I almost should have answered it. M0, M1, and M2. So you have to remember M0 is the most liquid. It goes from most liquid to least liquid. M0 is the money in a reserve and the money that is circulating the economy. M1 is everything that's in M0, but also in your bank accounts, specifically the accounts that you can gain access to the money too easily. M2 is everything in M0 and M1, and any deposit accounts that take a while for you to be able to get access to it. So M0 would be the money in the bank vaults and the cash held by the public. Everybody good so far, right? M1 now.
Yes, sir.
Right. M1 would be everything that's in M0. Yes, Rachel?
Sorry, sir. Told you I was getting thumbs up. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. All right. M1 would be everything that's in M0 plus say demand deposits. That is money that you deposit into your account and you could get it back. You could get access to it at any time. And then M2 would be everything in M1 plus his savings account deposits and his certificates of deposits. Those take a little while for you to get access to. Treasury bills would not be M0, M1, or M2. You see how M0, M1, M2 there? M0, your cash in the bank vault plus the cash held by the public adds up to 300,000. M1, everything in M0 plus the demand deposits. That is your account that you're saving. You put your money in that you can get access to at any time. And then M2, everything that's in M1 plus its savings account deposits and its certificates of deposits. Because it'll take you a little longer to get access to that money. Right, so here they ask you to define the term corporate bond and treasury bond. You have to say, what is this, debt or equity?
Equity.
Bonds are debt. So the corporate bond, you're basically lending money to a company, and treasury bonds, they're basically lending money to the government. Bonds are debt. Shares, if they buy shares, that is equity. So treasury bonds, corporate bonds, municipal bonds, those are debt securities. So when they ask you to define corporate bonds and treasury bonds, they are both debt securities. The corporate bond is a debt security sold by companies. The treasury bond is a debt security sold by the government. If they ask about municipal bonds, that's a debt security sold by government agencies. And shares is an equity security.
Repeat, sir.
Corporate bonds, treasury bonds, and municipal bonds are all debt securities. You're basically lending money that you must get back with interest. They do not give you ownership of anything. And when you buy shares, that gives you ownership. So that would be an equity security. Equity securities give you ownership in something. And then they ask for two qualities of money. Who could give two qualities of money? Any qualities at all?
Medium of exchange.
No, that's what they use the money for. When you ask for qualities, you're looking at characteristics.
Sir,
Acceptable
is
and
visible.
durable.
Say that again. That's it. Two people talking.
Acceptable and durable.
Acceptable and durable. Anybody knows any others?
Disability.
Divisible. And what else? Somebody was saying something as well.
Homogeneous.
Homogeneous and portable and of limited supply. Right, so there's six you could choose from. Acceptable, portable, durable, homogeneous, divisible, and limited supply. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Alright. Now they said the informal sector of a country contributes positively to personal and national development. Very true. If you did, sorry, Ayo. If you did this for POB, you would have covered that there as well. They said discuss each of the following benefits of the informal sector. So, economic buffering, right? So the informal sector acts as a shock absorber whenever there's a crisis in the economy. So let's look at COVID, for example. When COVID-19 hit, a lot of people out of a job or their income reduced. So they relied on, instead of just falling into poverty, or instead of the government having to spend a lot of money to try and stop people from falling into poverty, a lot of persons turned to the informal sector. So a lot of people were involved in susus. Some people were involved in informal businesses, like for example, they might have been cooking food and selling it to different persons. I saw a lot of people start selling doubles, who learned to cut hair and cutting people hair at home. All those things which are not formally regulated by the government will be part of the informal sector. So instead of a lot of people just falling into poverty, the informal sector offered a little buffer, a means for people to still earn income. Alright, so it reduced the overall negative financial effects of COVID-19. Right? Now, when it comes to cost savings, when you are operating in the informal sector, a few things happen. One, you have less regulatory costs because you're not a registered business or anything like that, right? So you don't have to pay those fees. Two, you don't pay taxes. So you're actually able to avoid paying a tax. And then informal sector businesses normally have less cost anyway. And then instead of the bank fees and stuff that you'd have to pay when you're saving money and stuff, you could just go to the informal sector, save that.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah,
Can you go back over cost saving, please?
sure. So when you operate in the informal sector, you get to save costs in a few ways. One, you avoid regulatory costs, charges, because you're operating in the informal sector. So, for example, when you take a loan from the bank, you have certain bank fees that you have to pay. When you operate in a SUSU, instead, you avoid having to pay those fees. Yeah?
Okay, sir. So that if we get a question like this on the exam, that's how we would explain each point.
Yes, you could explain it like that, given an example. So you could say, the informal sector allows you to avoid certain costs that you would have to pay if you were operating in the formal sector. And then you could give two examples. You could explain what economic buffering is, absorbing the negative effects that would happen from an economic shock, and then you could give some examples of how the informal sector would do it by allowing businesses to still, some informal businesses to still operate, which will allow workers to earn income, and it will still give some persons access to funding that they would normally not have during that time. So now they can earn, they can't get a loan from the bank because they don't have a job, but they might be able to get money from a money lender, or they might be able to take part in a susu. So they're still able to get money. Let's look at this last one here. They said Maggie and six of her friends are dissatisfied with the local community bank. They decided to try another method of saving. Maggie was appointed community leader and received cash deposits from her six friends on a weekly basis. Every week, Maggie gives a different person a cash lump sum equal to the total amount she collected from everyone. Then he asked, state two names by which this informal method of savings is called. What is this they talking about here?
Foreigner or susu.
Asusu. What's another name for it?
Hand.
Say that again?
Partner.
Fox hand.
Fox hand? Fox hand?
Meeting turns.
Say that third one?
Meeting turns.
Meeting turns. Okay. Yeah, no meeting turn. And no partner. And no hand. And no susu. First time I heard fox hand though.
Sir, I've seen the
No,
course.
sir, box hand.
Or box hand. Yeah, first time I heard that one. I know meet and turn. I know hand. I know partner. Um, I'm not sure. Supposed to have two more just now. Huh? Box
Sir,
and
syndicatos.
say that again.
Syndicatos is another name for it.
Okay, okay. I learning some names too. Let's check something. Other names for Susu. But yeah, partner. Oh, box hand, pops. There's no hand. So I learn that one now. In Bahamas, they call it Asue, A-S-U-E. And in Haiti, Sol, S-O-L. And then with Africa, have a whole bunch of different names. In Kenya, they call it a merry-go-round. And well, I know gifting circle, even though there's a different kind of susu. Alright. And then they said discuss the role of one of the informal methods of saving stated in C1. Well, it's the same method of saving. Anyway, but yeah, so how the susu works, it helps you build a saving habit without having to use the bank account. It could also give you it could give you access to a large sum of money faster than you normally would have it. So let's say you have one of the first hands. You'll get a large sum of money faster than you normally would have if you were just saving it. It allows you to avoid taking a loan which may have high interest. Alright. And that is the financial sector. So we are going to move on now. We're going to look at economic management, policies, and goals. Here you're going to learn a few terms. Well, should be revision anyway. We look at the role of the government in stabilizing the economy, the types of taxes, and key fiscal concepts. We're going to look at national income, GDP, GNP, and so forth. The circular flow of income, inflation, recession, and unemployment, and the difference between economic growth and economic development. I'll be sending y'all, should be sending y'all this. The role of the government in stabilizing the economy. Right, so the government has a few rules that they have to play when it comes to stabilizing the economy. Right? They are the ones in charge. So they are the ones that have to put certain things in place to ensure that the economy runs smoothly. So that persons are able to use the resources to satisfy their unlimited wants. And by the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? So one of the rules is to attempt to have full employment. So everybody who wants to work should be able to get a job. In order to do that, we need to have job opportunities and we need to have persons who are qualified to get those job opportunities. So they have to create means for people to get qualified. That's why we have schools and stuff. And that's why we have all that infrastructure and we support persons opening businesses and things like that. So that it will help create jobs. So we could hopefully achieve the goal of full employment. The next role, price stability. They have to try to get prices not to increase or decrease too quickly, because that will make things difficult in the economy. To be very hard for you to plan your finances and operate if prices are fluctuating all the time. So they will attempt to have price stability. So they will put certain policies in place to help control pricing. Something called monetary policies, which we'll look at in a bit, right? But I guess I could give you a little thing on it one time. You'll hear two kind of policies. You'll hear fiscal policies and you'll hear monetary policies. Monetary policies look at interest rates and look at controlling money through interest rates. Fiscal policy looks at the government, so mostly taxes. All right, we'll look at that in a little detail later on. Then, a next rule is something called the balance of payments. That is when they compare your exports and your imports. They want to make sure that you're exporting more than we're importing. So they will promote tourism, they will promote companies that or businesses or the sectors that do export. They will maybe increase taxes on imported goods, whatever they need to do to get that to happen. And they have to control tax. They have to get income through tax, and they have to spend the money on us, government expenditure. So they'll provide tax, they'll collect money through different means of taxes, whether it's income tax, corporation tax, VAT, whatever it is, and then they're going to spend that money on us, on the public. They'll create infrastructure. They'll pave roads, pay government workers like our police service or the public hospitals, things like that. So they spend it on us. They have to create transfer policies. So they're supposed to identify places or groups that are vulnerable or in need and then try to help them. Whether it's food cards, whether they're providing some sort of income or benefits for persons who are currently unemployed, whatever it is. And they have to push for economic growth and economic development. So not only should they be selling more goods and services every year, but the quality of life should also improve. People should be happier. People should be more comfortable. All of these are the roles of the government that the government plays in the economy. And let's look at the different types of tax. And again, if you did PUB, you would have looked at the different types of tax. There's direct tax and there's indirect tax. Direct tax comes straight from you and goes straight to the government. So it comes straight out from your income or your profits and goes directly to the government. It doesn't pass through any third parties. So your income tax or your corporation tax income tax comes straight from your salary and goes to the government. Corporation tax comes straight from your profits and goes to the government. Those will be considered um direct tax. This tax could be progressive or regressive. Most, if not all, um, countries aim to have progressive tax. Progressive tax means if you earn more money, you have to pay more tax. If you earn less money, you pay less tax. Regressive is the opposite. You earn more money, you pay less tax. You earn less money, you pay more tax. Mhm. You all know what the national budget is? You all ever listened to it for your country before? Anybody?
Yes, sir.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
It's basically the how the government plans to spend and earn money for a particular year. Is their plan on how they're gonna get money and how they're gonna spend it. Right. National debt now is the total amount of money that the government would owe. Right? It could get larger or smaller over time according to if they're owing people more, if they're paying off their debt. Fiscal deficit, remember I said fiscal looks at the government, specifically tax. Fiscal deficit is when the government is spending more than it's earning. That's something we don't want, right? Now, went through monetary policy and fiscal policy already, but we still look at it again. Monetary policy uses interest rates and the money supply to try and control inflation. Anybody here knows what inflation is?
Yes, sir.
What's
When
inflation?
prices continuously rising over time.
When prices continuously rise over time. Very good. So monetary policy is using interest rates and the money supply is using money to try and combat inflation. So let's look at monetary policy a little bit for a second, right? And inflation. Inflation is the loss of value of money over time. So let's say, for example, I love to use this example. I found the last dinosaur egg in the world. There's no other dinosaur egg that exists to human knowledge. How much money you think that dinosaur egg will be worth?
Billions.
Billions, right? It'll be worth so much. And then, after I find that last dinosaur egg, Rachel come and find 100,000 of the same dinosaur egg. Is my dinosaur egg still worth billions?
No,
No.
sir.
No, it lost value because of the whole set of other dinosaur eggs, right? It's the same thing with money. The more money it have circulating, the less its value. So that's how I want you to think when you're trying to think about how you want to control inflation. The more money, the lower the value. So the more money means more inflation. So how can I use interest rates to reduce inflation? If I increase interest rates, right? Let's say I increase interest rates in the bank. Do you think people will take more loans or less loans?
Less loans.
Last.
Less loans, right? Which means to have less money circulating, which means It might help reduce the inflation. What about the money supply? The central bank control how much money banks hold in reserve. What do you think they could do to reduce inflation? Should they increase how much money they have in reserve or decrease it?
Decrease it.
If they decrease it, that means they'll have more money. But if they increase the amount of money they have to have in reserve, that's less money that banks could use, which means they'll have less money circulating, and that will help combat inflation. You'll understand?
Yes, sir.
Right. Fiscal policy now, taxation is used to control spending. So if I don't want you importing goods, what could I do?
You can raise the tariff and raise taxation on imported goods.
Correct. And if I want you to buy a certain good, what could I do?
Drop the tax on it.
Drop the taxes
Exactly.
on all the price.
Exactly. So they can use inflation, they could use fiscal policy to control spending as well. So if they wanted to use monetary policy to increase spending, what would they do with the interest rates? Would they raise it or lower it?
Lower, lower it.
Lower it. Now loans are easier to afford. All right. Now, the last thing here, disposable income. Disposable income refers to the amount of money you have remaining after you pay your taxes. So you say you make $10,000 a month, and your tax is $2,000, your disposable income would be $8,000. Simple enough?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now we're going to take a look at GDP, GNP, national income. And we're going to come back and take a look at GDP in a little more detail after, right? Because you have different methods to calculate GDP. Now, I want you to understand this difference. GDP is the total value of goods and services produced within a country's borders. It didn't say total value of goods and services produced by a particular country within the borders. It doesn't matter who produced it. Once it was produced within the borders of the country, it is part of the GDP. Domestic means home. So inside of the home, inside of the country. Gross national product is the total value of the goods and services produced by the country, regardless of what country it's in. So a good example, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have Digicel. Digicel is a Jamaican company. The Digicel in Trinidad will make up part of Trinidad's gross domestic product because it is located within Trinidad's borders. However, it will make up part of Jamaica's gross national product because it is a Jamaican company. You all understand the difference?
Yes, sir.
Mhm. So once it's within the country, it is GDP. Once it was created by the country, regardless of where it's located, it would be part of the GNP. Now, GDP has three different formulas. After I go through all of the different terms and concepts that we have to learn in this section, we will look at those three different formulas in detail, right? But there is one example of a formula right there. GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Anybody knows what is the name of that formula?
The expenditure method.
Good job. All right, good. Let's check in. Good. Now, national income is the total amount or the final goods and services produced within a country plus any income earned from abroad. Right, so it's basically your GNP, but you have to minus the depreciation from your investments. Right, that's the only difference. Somebody is joining. Now let's look at nominal output and real output. Anybody could tell me the difference between nominal output and real output?
Sir, nominal output measures at current price, while real output is the adjustment for inflation.
I could explain it. Why is it important to know the difference?
Sir, because nominal deals with the price, while real output deals with the inflation. So you don't want to mix them up.
All right. Well, I'll go a little further. If I want to see how much growth I have, I can't use the nominal output. If I use the nominal output, I'll get a false sense of information. Let me show you an example. Let's say 2024. Jesus, no. In 2024, I sold the total value of goods and services. Let's say it was 100 goods at $10 each, which is 1,000, right? So that was my GDP. In 2025, I had 90 goods at $15 each, which actually $20 each. which will work out to 1,800. So if I use this to measure to see if there was a growth in my GDP, how much would my GDP growth be? 2024 it was 1,000. 2025 it was 1,800. How much is my growth?
800.
800.
800. But this is misleading. For 2025, I am using the current prices for 2025, which is $20 each. That's why this worked out to be 1,800. But did I produce more goods?
No.
No, I did not. I produced 90, and in 2024, I produced 100. That is what happens if I use nominal output, the output using the current prices. What I need to do if I'm comparing, I need to use the same price for both years. That will give me a better understanding of if GDP rose or not. So if I was to use the same $10 in 2024 and 2025, then I would see that my GDP actually dropped. You all understand?
Yeah.
All right. So nominal output uses the
No,
current
sir.
prices. All right, do you want me to explain it again?
Yeah, sir.
All right. So I am comparing 2 years to see which has the better GDP, right? In 2024, produced 100 goods at $10 each, which came up to 1,000. In 2025, I produced 90 goods at $20 each, which come up to 1,800. If I look at it just like this, it looks as if my GDP increased, right? And yeah, no, maybe
Yeah, sir.
it does, right? But that's misleading because in 2025 there was inflation, which increased the prices from $10 to $20. That doesn't mean that I sold more goods. How much did I sell more goods in 2025? Look at the amount of goods. I did not,
No.
right? Right. So it's misleading. It's making it, because of inflation, it's making it look as if I had an increase in output when I actually didn't. That's what happens if you use nominal output. Nominal output is when you use the current prices. It doesn't account for inflation, and it could give you misleading information. Instead of using nominal output, I need to use real output. I need to use the same price for both years. That way I'll make an even playing field, and I'll be able to see which year actually had more output or not. So if I use the same $10 for both years, it will give me a more accurate impression on if my output increased or not. 90 by 10 is 900. So now I'm getting a more accurate view. My output actually decreased.
So the nominal output is the is where it had a little inflation
Mm-hmm.
through the years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the real output is where you're using the same price for throughout the years in order to see the
Correct.
difference.
Correct. In nominal
Okay.
output, I use the current year prices, which would have inflation in it, and that would be misleading. So instead of doing that, I use real output. When I use the same price for all the different years that I'm comparing, I use the same price. And that will give me a more fair view of what actually happened.
Okay, sir, thank you.
No problem. And the last thing, potential output. That is what we expect our maximum output to be. If we use all of our resources, what's the most our output could be? Now let's take a look at the circular flow of income. The circular flow of income shows how money moves around the economy between households, firms, and the government. So we see how money goes from households to firms, how money goes from firms to households, what the government's role is in all this. And then we'll look at what we mean when we say injections and leakages, right? Or withdrawals. So households provide firms with factors of production, right?
Yes, sir.
And in return, firms provide goods and services for households. Firms will pay households for the factors of production, and households will pay firms for the goods and services. Everybody good so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, when we look at injections and withdrawals, injections is anything that would add money into that flow. And withdrawals is anything that would take money from that flow. So, for example, if the household decides to import goods and no longer buy from the local firms, that will be considered a withdrawal. They'll be taking money from that flow. Or if the firm decides to hire remote workers from another country, that will be taking money from that flow. If somebody decides to invest into firms, that will put money into the flow. If they have to pay taxes, that will take money out of the flow. If the firms start to export and get more money from outside the country, that will put money into the flow. If households decide they're going to save some of their money and not spend it, that will take money out of the flow. You all understand?
I find the book. So I'm feeling just time.
Yes, sir.
So anything that's putting money into the flow, injections. Taking money out of the flow, withdrawals. The government facilitates both. They would take taxes, which will be a withdrawal, but they'll also spend money on public goods and stuff like that, which will be an injection. Now let's look at the difference between an open and a closed economy. A closed economy will have less injections and withdrawals because you'll have no trade with other countries. Think of it as a borders closed and a door shut. Open economies will have more leakages and injections because they trade um with other countries. Most of our Caribbean countries are open countries. We're going to take a little look on inflation and recession. Kind of looked at it already in a little sense. And then the different types of unemployment. And if it didn't POB, you're supposed to know the different types of unemployment. All right. So we kind of already touched what we could do with inflation and recession already, right? But let's take a look at it still in a little more detail, just to be clear cut. So we know inflation is when the value of money decreases, so your prices increase, right? That happens when you have too much money circulated, too much spending happening, right? That would increase production costs overall eventually and increase prices. So to do this, we need to decrease the spending. And to decrease the spending, we could increase interest rates, which will make loans more expensive, or we could increase taxes. If we increase taxes, people have less money to spend. Correct? Yeah, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. A recession now. This is when we have economic decline. So we don't have enough spending going on. This could lead to unemployment. It could lead to people having less money. So what we do the opposite. We lower interest rates. So now people could spend more. Or we lower taxes so people have more money. Everybody follow?
No, sir, can you repeat?
Alright, I said and before we're on the recession.
Sir, start from recession.
Sure. Alright, so whenever a recession, it means there's a period of economic decline. So there's not enough spending going on. People making less money. People gonna be losing their jobs. They're gonna have less income and stuff like that, right? So to fix that, we need people to spend more. In order to get people to spend more, we lower interest rates. So now loans are easier to afford. So people are more likely to take a loan and spend their money. Or we could cut taxes. If we cut taxes, people now have more money in their hands, they could spend more. You understand now?
Yes, sir.
Alright. Now let's look at unemployment. We know unemployment is when someone who actually is looking for a job does not have one, right? These types of employments are the different reasons why it could happen. So for one, structural unemployment. This is when there's a change in the economy. So for example, you was a graphic designer, and now people making graphic designs with AI in seconds, and a job no longer exists. Just an example. So to recover from that, the government may have to create training programs and invest in education so people could learn about the new industry or get a new set of skills. Then there's cyclical unemployment. That is unemployment due to an economic downturn. So like a recession going on. And well, when it have recessions, we use our monetary policy with the interest rates and our fiscal policy with the taxes to fix that. Seasonal unemployment is unemployment due to it being a particular time of the year. Hotels get that a lot. So during vacation times, hotels would be packed with staff. But outside of vacation time, when there's less persons in the hotel, a lot of staff might get sent home temporarily. So to fix that, you try to diversify the economy so that even when it's an off season, persons are still able to find jobs. Then we have frictional unemployment. And this is basically just when you're in between jobs. So you leave one job and you haven't started a new one yet. That's frictional unemployment. Last one. Real wage unemployment. Trade unions decide to negotiate, they want higher pay. The businesses agree. But now that the pay is higher, they can't allow to pay everybody. They could ask you all about either one of those. So make sure you know all five, please. Structural, cyclical, frictional, seasonal, real wage. Now let's take a look at the difference between economic growth and economic development. And then you all tell me which one you all think is more important. Economic growth is when your GDP, your real GDP, increases over time. Economic development is when your quality of life increases over time. So economic growth, you sell more products than you sold last year. Or you produce more products than you produced last year. Right? Economic development, life is nicer.
Development is more important.
Definitely, right? Yeah. Education levels high, you have access to healthcare, you're feeling safe, you're expected to live long lives, you're making more money. All those things matter more, right? Now, which one of these countries have a better standard of living and quality of life? Country A, GDP is 20,000. Country B, GDP, what capital B? GDP is 5,000. Who has the better standard of living and quality of life?
Country B,
Why country B?
because they have a lower GDP.
But GDP, remember you want to have a larger GDP, yeah? The bigger the GDP, the better. GDP is the
So what's
total
the question
value
you
of
asked?
goods. Which country has the better standard of living and quality of life?
The one is if it's not country B, it'll be country A.
The correct answer is we don't have enough information to know. GDP alone can't tell you who is more comfortable.
So we need information such as the population and so on.
Right. So let's say exactly that. So let's say country A now has a population of 10,000. Country B has a population of 20 people. Who you think living nicer? The 10,000 that have to share 20,000 in GDP, or the 20 people that share in 5,000 in GDP?
20.
It is
20
the,
20.
countries.
the population of 10 Russian 20.
Right. So you can't just look at the GDP. You have to look at the GDP per person, or in economics, what we call it is the GDP per capita. Right? Per capita means per person. So country A, although they had a larger GDP, they may have even had the larger economic growth. When it comes to quality of life, it's nowhere near country B. So you cannot use GDP as a measurement of economic development and quality of life. GDP alone is not enough information to measure economic development and quality of life. You have to have at least GDP per capita, GDP per person. Everybody follow?
So,
Yes, sir.
Mhm. Now let's look at a developed country or a developed economy versus a developing economy. A developed economy already has citizens making high incomes. They have a good GDP per capita. They have a high standard of living. They are using advanced technology. All those things already. They have those things. A developing economy is one who does not have it, but is trying to get it. So they have lower income levels. the industrialization is less, they have less advanced technology, they're trying to make improvements to the infrastructure, etc. They are trying to reach the status of a developed country economy. Most of our Caribbean countries will fall into that category. We're trying to reach the status of a developed economy. Now let's look at trade unions. And as we saw just now with the types of unemployment, trade unions aren't always great. Sometimes they could have negative effects. But a trade union, the whole purpose of the trade union is to create something called collective bargaining. It's supposed to be the voice of the employees. So instead of one employee negotiating for himself, it will represent all employees negotiating together. So they have collective power. And so the good thing is that they can negotiate to improve your wages, they could get better working conditions, more benefits, better working hours, things like that, right? They'll be able to do things that you might not be able to do by yourself because of the power of collective bargaining. However, disadvantages, if they ask for too much, they could cause real wage unemployment, as we saw before. When they ask for too high wages, and the companies can't afford to keep everybody on the payroll, so they had to let go some people. Oh, we took a peek at balance of payments already. You know that is the um transactions between a country and the rest of the world. You want our exports to be larger than our imports. You just gonna take a quick look at the GDP calculation method, right? And there's 3 methods to calculate GDP. Who could tell me all 3 methods? The names.
Income, expenditure, and per capita.
No, not per capita. Income is 1, expenditure is 1, and there's one more.
Capital.
Well, output.
Output.
Oh,
Income method, the expenditure method, and the output method. Oh, actually, I have it right here. Income method, expenditure method, output method. So, for the income method, when you're thinking about the income method, what I want you to do is think about your factors of production. Right? Land is rent, labor is wages, capital is interest, entrepreneurship is profit. You're adding those 4 things together. Now, your profit is supposed to be a profit before depreciation and tax. So to get your profit before depreciation and tax, normally to calculate your profit, you'll minus depreciation and you'll minus tax. So to get your profit before depreciation and tax, you'll have to add back depreciation, which I don't have here, but you'll add back depreciation and you'll add back tax. And then if there's any subsidies in the question, you'll minus subsidies. And we look at a question just now for you all to get a better idea. So it's rent plus wages plus capital plus interest. That is your rewards from your 4 factors of production. Then you're adding back any depreciation or tax, and you're subtracting any subsidies if it have any. We're gonna do an example with this just now. So if you want, I can give you a second. You can write down income method and write down the formula. Just remember, after profit, make sure and put plus depreciation, plus taxes, minus subsidies. I will give you a minute. The expenditure method, which is the one that we was looking at just now in the table, looks at the total money spent. And there's two ways I tell my students to remember it. You can remember the acronym CGI, like in movies, CGI, and then net exports, which is exports minus imports. Or if SIG is easier for you to remember, like a cigar, CIG, and then net exports, which is exports minus imports. But that's what that CIG, C plus I plus G plus XM is. C is consumer spending. What is the I? Anybody?
Investment.
Investment.
Right. The G?
Government.
Government
Government
spending.
spending. Correct. And then X minus M is in net exports. Exports minus imports. Right. So consumer spending or household spending. Investments. Sorry. Government spending plus in net exports, which is exports minus imports. Again, I'll give you a minute to write it down. And the third one, the output method. The output method is basically adding the total value of all the goods and services produced. But you have to subtract any intermediate consumption. So for example, if I have wood from trees, right? And the wood costs $500. And I use the wood to make a table. And the table is now worth $2,000. I cannot add the wood and the table together to get total output. The reason being, the wood is a part of the table. So I'll be counting the wood twice. Does that make sense? Remember, I use this wood to make this table. Right? So to get the total output, I would take the wood still, the wood is worth 500, and I would add the additional value that was given to the wood. So the table went from being worth 500 when it was just wood to 2,000, which means how much additional value did it get?
Okay.
1,500. So I will add 1,500 to 500 to get the total output. That's what they mean when they say minus any intermediate goods or any intermediate consumption, because they wouldn't want me to count the same products twice. Now here the thing with these three different methods, completely different methods using completely different figures. All three of them should give you the same GDP figure. If you use the output method, you use the expenditure method, you use the income method, they all supposed to give you the same amount. Let me give you the same example I normally give my class, right? So in Trinidad, doubles, which is one of the most delicious street foods in the world, is $6 TT. I could look at that doubles in three different ways. I could look at I have to spend $6 to buy that doubles. That would be me watching doubles like the expenditure method. I have to spend $6 to buy it. Or I could look at it as, if I sell this doubles, I will get $6. That is me looking at it as the income method. So I could spend $6 and get a doubles, or I could sell a doubles and get $6. Or if I look at it at the output method, I would say this doubles is worth $6. So I looked at it at in three completely different ways. How much I'm spending for it, how much money I'm making from selling it, and how much money it's worth. And in those three completely different ways, the answer was the same. So even though you're looking at your GDP using three completely different formulas, looking at it in three completely different ways, it's supposed to add up to the same amount. All right, so let's take a look at a question to see if that is the case. So it said study table 2, which shows information on the gross domestic product of a country, and answer the questions that follow. Use the information in the table 2, calculate the gross domestic product, GDP for the country using each of the following methods. The first one is the income method. What I told you what to think about when you're doing the income method. Anybody can remember?
The factors of production.
Right. That is you're starting off one time with the rewards from the factors of production. Land is
Rent,
rent. Labor is
wages,
wages. Capital is
interest,
and entrepreneurship is
profit.
profit. Now we have to make our adjustments. We're going to add any depreciation and tax and minus any subsidies if it have any. Are you all seeing any rental income here?
Yes, sir.
How much is it?
$75.
$75. Any wages?
Yes, sir. 65.
65. Any interest?
Yes, sir. 150.
150. Any profits?
No, sir.
Check it again.
Oh, yes, sir. 200.
200. So we start off with our 75 plus 65 plus 150 plus 200. Now for the adjustments. Is there any depreciation?
Yes, sir. $35.
55. Any taxation?
Yes, sir. $75.
$75. All right. Now, this last figure here, the net foreign factor income. This is money made from out foreign by local companies. So it's part of the profit. The net foreign factor income is money made by local companies from foreign. So I'm going to add that in. So that will be 75 plus 65 plus 150 plus 200 plus 35 plus 75 plus 20. How much does that add up to?
620.
620?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now let's go to the next method. So they made a mistake here when they put output method. It really was supposed to be expenditure method because they don't have the information for the output method here.
So what would have happened in the exam?
They probably would have gotten either leave out the question completely or they would have gotten awarded the 4 marks.
Okay.
Alright, so The expenditure method, that is when we're looking at CGI or CIG. So we're looking for consumer spending. Are you seeing anything that could be consumer spending?
Yes, sir. $300.
The
$100.
household consumption, right?
Yeah.
I'm write out the formula first. C plus I plus G plus net exports, which is X minus M. Right. Do you see this consumer spending is 300? Now we're looking for investment. You seen any investment?
Purchases in US
Yes.
government.
I seen gross private
Those
investment
government things.
120.
Yeah.
Now we're looking for government spending. Are you seeing any government spending?
150.
Yes, sir.
150.
150.
$150.
Right. The net exports is exports minus imports. So we're looking for either net exports or we're looking for our net exports and imports to calculate it. You seen anything like that?
Net exports $50.
Net exports 50. So we're using completely different figures, right? Than the income method. Let's see. 300 plus 120 plus 150 plus 50.
620.
620. So the answer would be the same even though you're using different figures because you're basically looking at the same thing just in different ways. Like the example I showed you with the doubles. Everybody follow?
Yes, sir.
Let's do this last question here one time now. They made a mistake in this question as well. They put economic growth twice. This should be economic development.
Sir, so if we go into CSC and we see that they give this
Yo,
much mistake with their characters or with the invigilator stuff, this is a mistake,
no, the
whatever.
invigilator may not know unless somebody points it out to them. So what will happen is in the correction level, when it's time to correct the papers and they notice the mistake, they will make a decision if they either leaving out the part completely or awarding the marks. In most cases, they would award the marks because when you think about it, when you see the error, that's gonna cost you time because you're gonna try to make sense of it. And just leaving it out completely wouldn't be enough compensation for that. So in most cases, they give you the marks.
Okay then, sir.
So let's see. Country A, GDP increased by 20,000. Country B, GDP increased by, no, a lie. Country A, annual percentage change in GDP was a 3%. Country B was a 5%. So country B, GDP increased a little more in terms of percentage. Country B has the higher percentage, higher GDP than country A. Country A has the higher GDP per capita, the higher literacy rate, and the higher average life expectancy. Sorry. Which one of these have the higher economic growth?
Country A.
B.
Country B. Remember, economic
Country B.
growth looks specifically at GDP. Whichever GDP increased by more has the larger economic growth. So the answer would be country B because country B's GDP increased by a larger percentage. They also have a higher GDP than country A. Country B, their GDP increased by a larger percentage than country A. Alright, also just to get extra marks, it should be noted that they also have a higher GDP than country A. Then they ask which one has the higher economic development. What will be the answer?
Country A.
Which one country A has the higher economic development, right? Because
Yes.
They have the higher
When you can
GDP
see it's everything.
per capita. They have the higher literacy rate.
See rates,
And they have the higher life expectancy.
something.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah?
Not of course, but would this be something like absolute advantage and comparative advantage?
No, that would be something different. Comparative advantage looks at who could produce a product given with lower opportunity cost.
Opportunity costs.
And absolute
And also,
advantage is who could produce more of a product using the same resources. Right, so that's something different. We will be looking at that too. Don't worry. So country A would have the higher economic development because of their GDP per capita, their literacy rate, and their average life expectancy. You all good there?
Yes, sir.
All right. So at this point, we are going to take our first break. We've been going since 12. It's 2:15. We shall resume at 2:30. So you don't have to log out. You could wait right there. We'll take a break and shake up yourself, right? Now we're going to take a look at international trade. Now we will look at why countries trade, the key international trade terms, the balance of payments, equilibrium and disequilibrium, exchange rates, trade policies, tools, and the World Trade Organization. Right. So why do countries trade with each other? Firstly, international trade is when a country buys and sells goods with another country across another border, right? Or across borders. It's very unlikely that one country could produce everything that they need completely. So in most cases, they have to trade with another country. Now, some countries may have a lot of access to a particular good or service, or may specialize in a particular good or service, so they might choose to sell that good or service only or specialize in it and maximize output in that particular good or service. And they will trade that good or service and then use the income to buy the other things that they need. So it have two main reasons why countries trade internationally, right? Or at least two theories. And that is again, or to see what they have absolute advantage in and comparative advantage in. Somebody was now asking about these two things. So for you to have absolute advantage, it means that you are able to produce more of a good than another country using the same resources. So in layman's terms, I have 3 mangoes. Where's our 3 mangoes? Shaniko have 3 mangoes. Shaniko is able to make 3 bags of mango chow with those 3 mangoes, but I am able to make 5 bags of mango chow with my same 3 mangoes. I have the comparative advantage. The absolute advantage, sorry. I have the absolute advantage. The comparative advantage now looks at the opportunity cost. How much a country has to give up to produce another good or service. So if you have to give up less than the other country to produce a good or service, then you have the absolute advantage. So in order for me to produce 10 bags of mango chow, I have to not produce 5 bags of pineapple chow. In order for Shaniqua to produce 10 bags of mango chow, she have to not produce 2 bags of pineapple chow. So because she's given up less than me, she has the comparative advantage. Everybody good so far?
Yes, sir.
Right. That question come fairly often. Most likely you'll see a question on it in paper 2 and slash or paper 1. Right. And what do countries gain from trade? Right? Both countries would benefit. Both countries are trading with benefit when they specialize in an area that they have absolute advantage in and comparative advantage in and trade with each other. Right? One, both countries now have a larger target market. Two, the total output is going to increase. If you just make, let's say you extract oil faster than I do, and I extract, let's say, zinc faster than you do. It makes sense for me to really focus on zinc and you to focus on oil. And then I could get my oil from you and you could get your zinc from me. It just makes sense. Yes. Now for the different terms of trade now. If your export prices rise around the same with import prices, that's something good. If your prices of exports change in price around the same rate as the imports, that is good. The factors that influence trading now. Basic things. Technology levels. The labor costs. The availability of natural resources. Infrastructure. Location. You might typically trade with somebody closer to you. If you have a large amount of agriculture, as your natural resources, you'll probably trade that. In Trinidad, we have a large amount of oil, so we will trade oil, and so on and so forth. In the Caribbean, we trade a lot of agriculture, oil, minerals like bauxite, and we rely heavily on tourism. And then for our imports, we normally buy manufactured goods because we don't do a lot of manufacturing in the Caribbean. And a lot of capital like machinery, equipment. We're gonna take a little look at some of the terms in international trade. See, a balance of trade is the difference between the country's exports and imports of visible goods. When you mean visible goods, we mean not services. So my company would not be part of the balance of trade because I provide an invisible good. I provide a service. Things like sugar, rum, oil, furniture, bananas, machinery, those will be considered visible goods. Right? If your exports are larger than your imports, then you have what we call a surplus. Surplus means you have more. If the imports are larger than the exports, then you have a deficit, which means you have less. So if your exports are more, that means you're selling more than you're buying, so you have a surplus. If your exports are less, that means you're buying more than you're selling, so you have a deficit. You'll understand that, right? You'll understand that? Yeah? No?
Yes,
Maybe?
sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Your balance of payments now is a record of all transactions. All transactions with other international countries, with other countries, I should say. All international transactions. So that I would be included in the balance of payments. Well, when students from other countries are in class. But not in the balance of trade because it's not a physical good. Everybody understand the difference between the balance of payments and the balance of trade, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now the balance of payment has three main components. It has the current account, capital account, and the financial account. Now which we look at the international reserves for. So let's look at the current account first. The current account shows the flow of goods, services, income, and current transfers. But it records the flow. Right? It's a broader version of the balance of trade. The balance of trade just looks at the physical exports and imports. The current account right. So the balance of trade, stress goods. The current account, goods, services, income, and transfers. All right, so to include the balance of trade, which is the visible goods. It will have what we call the balance of services, which will be invisible goods. The total export of services minus total imports of services. Then it will have your income, which is the money earned by the residents from investments abroad. So it could be interest or profit. When we see income, we're looking at the money earned from investments abroad and money that is sent back home by workers who are abroad, which is what we call money remittances. Somebody go away, they make money and they send money back for their family. Right? And then if we have money, so current transfers refers to money given for nothing in return. So grants and stuff like that. The capital account now shows the flow of funds associated with the purchase and sale of assets, of non-current assets specifically, stuff for investment. Now, this would include any foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment is when a company creates or puts up any sort of infrastructure in another country. So a company in Trinidad buys a building in Barbados for their business. That would be foreign direct investment. Portfolio investment, so buying and selling shares. Loans, to also include loans like borrowing money or lending money to other countries. All that to be part of the capital account. Right? Anything pertaining to long-term assets. Oof. I'm sending you all something in your WhatsApp group now. Right, so far, current account looks at goods, services, income, and current transfers. Capital account looks at um non-current assets, so the purchase and sale of assets, which will include FDIs, foreign direct investment, loans, portfolio investments, so buying shares and stuff like that. And then the net international reserve, that refers to the foreign currencies held by a country's central bank. See, total foreign assets held by the central bank minus anything they own. Right? This is normally used to pay off like debts or pay for imports Or let's say they're lacking foreign exchange, you could use that. Right. Everybody follow so far, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. Right. The tariff and quotas. Tariffs and quotas are normally used to try to control our imports. Because as we could see so far, when you're looking at balance of trade and balance of payments, current accounts, capital accounts, etc., we want to have more exports than imports all around. So, for example, let's say we have a balance of payments deficit. Our imports are higher than our exports. What we could choose to do is increase our tariffs on certain imports. If we increase our tariffs on certain imports, chances are people will buy less internationally to avoid the tax. Not only would they buy less internationally, but they might buy more locally. Because instead of buying it international, they had to buy it local. So to help stimulate our economy a little bit and reduce our imports, which could improve our balance of payments. Or they could set a quota, which is a limit on the quantity of a certain good that can be imported. Everybody follow so far, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, that common
Yes, sir.
external tariff refers to when CARICOM and the CARICOM members use a uniform tariff, meaning they charge the same percentage of tax on a particular good or goods for imports outside of the region. That gives them a larger amount of bargaining power. Right? So this is the balance of payments made up of the current account, which is your visible goods, the invisible goods, income, and current transfers. Capital account, which would be your non-current assets for the purchases and sales and non-current assets. And you look at your FDI, you will look at loans and so forth, and portfolio investment. Then we look at the financing account. Right. So that is what they would do to try to correct the imbalances and a balance of payment surplus. When you have more exports than imports. I think you'll understand that. Now let's look at balance of payment disequilibrium. What causes us to have a deficit and what causes us to have a surplus? Just give me one more. So causes a deficit would be if consumers have a high demand for imports. So for some reason, it could be that the goods don't exist locally or they're too high priced, so they import it instead. Or we have low exports, or we have less tourism. All these things could cause a deficit. If we have a deficit, we're going to end up with less money in our foreign reserve. Because remember, that's what we're using for our imports. It also means we're spending more than we're getting in terms of international trade. So that's going to reduce the total amount of money we have and maybe even increase our debt. Right? Investors will now be less likely to want to invest into our country. And if it gets really, really bad, we might have to try to seek help from the IMF. So if we have a deficit, we need to do something to fix it. We could use tariffs or quotas to reduce imports. Or we could try to encourage exports by devaluing the currency. If we devalue the currency, which is like a double, it not just it reduces it increases exports and reduces imports. If we devalue the currency, now for international persons, our goods and services are now cheaper. Because when they convert it to TT, they get in more money. So that will cause them to buy more from us, so our exports will increase. Simultaneously, if we devalue our currency, buying goods internationally just became more expensive. So that would decrease our imports. Now, if we have a surplus, it means we exported more than we imported. What that could cause is our currency to increase in value, and all of the spending and money coming in could potentially lead to inflation. Which we don't want. So if it starts to lead to things like that, to remedy it, you'll have to reevaluate our currency or maybe reduce quotas and tariffs to increase imports. The ideal thing would be to have a balance of payments which is balanced or equal. There must be a surplus Not too large a surplus that it could lead to inflation. Sorry, I'm not hearing you. You're sounding really, really soft.
No, I wasn't speaking. I didn't even know it was a phone. Sorry.
Okay. Right. Now let us look at the different exchange rates. Right, the exchange rate to determine how much one currency is worth when you compare it to the next currency. So US to EC is how much again, boy? 2.7. $1 is worth $2.70 EC. That is what the exchange rate is. We're comparing one currency and it's worth to another. One EC is $2.50 TT. There are different types of exchange rates. You have the fixed exchange rate or the pegged exchange rate. That's when the value of the currency is pegged or attached to another currency or something else like gold. So let's say Trinidad is, for example, pegged at $6.8 to US. US currency increase, value increase, ours value increase automatically. US decrease, ours decrease automatically. Yeah? We basically promising to buy and sell at that rate no matter what. Or you can peg it to gold. The value of gold increase, your currency increase. The value of gold decrease, your currency decrease. Then we have the floating exchange rate. The floating exchange rate means it's determined solely on supply and demand. So if people want the currency more, the value would raise. If people want the currency less, the value would drop. So the example there, what they mean is that one day the Jamaican dollar will be worth a certain the US dollar will be worth a certain amount of Jamaican dollars, and then the next day it will change. And then the next day it will change. And so forth. And then there's a managed float. The managed float occurs when the government, through the central bank, will intervene and revalue the currency. So they might come and say, hey, what? Right now it's $6.80 TT for one US. From today forward, it's going to be $3 TT for one US. They could do that. It will have major effects. but they could do it. I wouldn't recommend they do it, but they could do it. Now, if you see the word appreciation, when it comes to a currency, it means the currency value is rising. If you see depreciation, that means the currency is falling. Now, if you see the word revalued, that means the government decided to increase the rate. And if you see devalued, that means the government decided to decrease the rate. I would really like you all to know all of those terms before you go into the exam, right? Fixed exchange rate, floating exchange rate, the managed float, appreciation, depreciation, revaluation, and devaluation. I believe I would have sent it here already as any notes I would have sent, so please go through it. When you get a chance. Last but not least, the trade policy and tools of the WTO. Now, the World Trade Organization, emphasis on the word world. They provide a trade framework for trading and how decisions are being made on trading across the world for the globe to listen. Right, so they would state how tariffs are to be created, how quotas are to be used and to be created, subsidies, embargoes. You all know what an embargo is?
No, sir.
Right, so America had an embargo on Cuba. Do they still have a embargo on Cuba, boy? Or did it stop? Let me check. 1 second, let's make sure I'm telling you the right thing. Does the US still have an embargo on Cuba? Yes, they still have an embargo on Cuba. Right? So to have an embargo means that trade is banned completely with that particular country. So America has an embargo on Cuba since 1962. Right? So now it is illegal for any US citizen to trade with Cuba. If you buy a Cuban cigar, that's illegal. If you buy a Cuban coffee, that's illegal. Right? They've been under this for like 66 years or something like that now. Right? The World Trade Organization will create a framework under which embargoes are allowed. Right? They're the ones that will force these rules and stuff, right? If they have any disputes, they will go to the World Trade Organization and they would settle the disputes. Right? Even though we are in the Caribbean, we are part of the world, so we have to follow all the rules and guidelines set by the World Trade Organization as well. Even though we have our own regional body, we have CARICOM and so forth, we have our CSME, we still have to follow the World Trade Organization. Now in CARICOM, the whole purpose is to promote trade among member states, right? Trade among all the other CARICOM countries. That's why we don't have tariffs. right? We have no tariffs among our member countries. So we could trade with one another freely. Right? We can also work in each other's countries freely. I could go and get a work permit now and go and work in Barbados or Jamaica or Grenada, St. Lucia, and so forth. Guyana. That's why we have so much. We have a good bit of Jamaicans in Trinidad working right now. Because CARICOM allows it. Right? Let's take a look at the question. So this is 2024 number 4, right? They said to study and list the economic concepts given below and answer the questions that follow. They say you can get an idea how the questions could come. So they had the different economic concepts like balance of trade, balance of payments, common external tariff, exchange rate regime, net international reserves, and quota. And we have to read the definitions and place the correct concept by the definition. We know balance of trade looks specifically at what type of goods again?
Visible goods.
Visible goods, right? The
Visible goods.
tangible ones, not services. So it would not have been all transactions of a country. That would have been balance of payments. Then it said a system used by the central bank to set up and manage a country's currency in relation to other currencies. That would be your exchange rate. Think we know that? A country's insurance against unfavorable changes in the economy. That's the money that we keep on reserve in case something happens. Then they have a limit placed on the import and exports of a specific product for a given time period. What would that be?
Repeat, sir.
A limit placed on import and export of a specific product for a given time period. Which economic concept is that out of the 6A?
Quota.
A quota, correct. Then they have a common set of charges imposed by a group of countries on imports for non-member countries.
Common external tariff.
Common external tariff. And we know that this last one, the difference between the value of exports and the value of imports of a country for a given time period would have to be the balance of trade, even though they didn't say visible goods. That's the only one that remaining. Then they said explain how each of the following remedies can reduce the balance of payment deficit in a country. Country devaluation. Remember, we looked at this. If they devalue the currency, the imports will decrease and exports will increase. Reason being, imports will now become more expensive because the value of our currency decrease. But because our currency decrease, the goods will cost less to foreign countries now because our currency is now cheaper, which will allow them to be able to export more, allow us to be able to export more because they will buy more. So you'll have an increase in our exports and a decrease in our imports. What about trade barriers now? If we have a balance of payment deficit, meaning we have too much, we have more imports than exports, what trade barriers could we use to help with that?
Tariff.
Tariffs and one more,
Quota.
quota. We could
Quotas.
use tariffs and quotas to help reduce the amount of imports by either increasing the cost of imports or reducing the amount that is allowed to be imported. Right? So that would reduce our imports. And now people will be forced to buy locally once the item exists locally, which will help benefit the economy one time. Then they have import substitution. So we substitute some of the imported goods with domestic goods instead. It could help reduce imports, which could help reduce the deficit. Export promotion. If we promote more exports of goods and services by investing into various sectors, you could increase exports, which will help decrease the deficit. And here, they give us a table, study table 2, which shows the balance of payments activities from country A and answer the questions that follow. And they ask us to calculate the capital account. So we know exports from goods and services and imports from goods and services will be in the current account, because the current account has the goods, services, income, and transfers. So we know that not going in the capital account. What we have to look at is the investments. We have investments by local residents sent overseas and local investments by non-nationals. So the inflow will be the local investments by non-nationals, as the money that coming into the country, this 20. But the outflow would be the local residents sending money overseas. So that means our value of our capital would be the 20 as the inflow minus the 100, our outflow, which is negative 80. Then it asks us to calculate the value of the current account. So that's our exports and imports of the goods and services. So it will be the exports minus imports. So the money coming in will be the 30, and the money going out will be the 90, the imports. So it will be 30 take away 90, which is negative 60.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, can you go back up so I can take a picture, please?
Sure. I mean, I'll also send this to you if you like. I can send this in
Yes,
the
please.
group.
Yes, please.
Okay then, so just send it to us then.
No problem. I'll send the whole paper, which has answers for the other questions as well, that you can go through as well, right?
Mhm. How are you?
What's that?
What year was that paper?
This is 2024. So then it asks to determine if there was a balance of payment, deficit, or a surplus. Our capital account is negative 80, and our current account is negative 60. We have a deficit, right? That is negative 140. That's a deficit. Right? So at this point, we have completed sections 1 to 7.